There's a parallel real estate market operating in Australia right now, where verified transactions from 2023 to 2026 document land changing hands for under $300 an acre. In some cases, well under. We're not talking about tiny hobby farms. We're talking about pastoral stations so large they dwarf small countries. I know that sounds insane. It's not. These are documented sales and active listings, anchored to specific properties, specific agents, and specific transaction dates. The system that prices Australian land has two tiers, and you've only been shown one of them. Here's why this matters. The per-acre prices you're about to see don't appear on Domain. They don't show up on realestate.com.au residential searches. They live in the pastoral and rural commercial segment, marketed through rural agents like LAWD, Nutrien Harcourt's GDL, CBRE Agribusiness, and Collier's Agribusiness. Firms that deal in properties measured in hundreds of thousands of acres, not square meters. And this isn't one isolated anomaly in one corner of the country. These prices exist across 5 different states and territories: Queensland, New South Wales, Western Australia, South Australia, the Northern Territory. Same country, completely different price reality. The transactions are verifiable, the acreage is real, and the per-acre figures you're about to hear aren't estimates. They come from documented sale prices and active 2025-2026 listing data. One more thing before we get into the list. Every property in this video is a pastoral station of institutional scale, tens of thousands to over 1 million acres per parcel. The per-acre price is the narrative anchor. This isn't an invitation to buy a lot and build a house. This is a window into how Australia's land is actually valued when no one from the city is watching. Start with scale. Quilpie Shire covers approximately 67,415 square kilometres of Channel Country floodplains and mulga scrub in southwest Queensland. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the Republic of Ireland. The entire shire holds 698 residents, according to the 2021 ABS census, a population density of roughly 0.01 persons per square kilometre. There is almost no one here, and yet the land is actively traded, actively used, and actively priced. Just not at the numbers most Australians associate with real estate. The property anchoring this region is Beechall, a freehold pastoral grazing station located southeast of Quilpie, marketed in late 2025 through Nutrien Harcourt's GDL with Bartlett & Co. The numbers are striking. Total area, 23,898.52 hectares, or 59,053 acres. Total auction price, $6,275,000 Australian dollars. That works out to approximately $106 per acre. The auction was scheduled for 16th of December 2025 at Quilpie, and the farm buy listing aggregating the Nutrien Harcourt's GDL and Bartlett & Co. marketing materials is publicly visible. This is documented. This is current. For comparison, the 2021 median farmland price in the southwestern Queensland Maranoa region was running around $160 per acre, and Richmond recorded prices around $49 per acre at that time. Beechall's $106 per acre sits in a range that is real, verifiable, and structurally explained by the conditions on the ground. This isn't a distressed sale or a clerical error. It's the price band at which Channel Country pastoral land trades. So why does this land cost $106 per acre, when comparable acreage in the Darling Downs trades at multiples of that figure? The answer is geography, rainfall, and infrastructure. Quilpie sits 961 kilometres by road from Brisbane. That's an 11.5-hour drive. The average annual rainfall is approximately 358 millimetres, and critically, it is highly variable. In good years, the Channel Country floods spectacularly, filling the vast braided river systems that give the region its name, supporting intensive short-term cattle production. In bad years, the same country can be bone dry for 18 months. The land is suitable for one thing at scale: extensive beef production on mulga and soft country. Mulga, the sparse, slow-growing acacia woodland that dominates much of outback Queensland, is nutritious in dry times, but requires enormous acreage per animal. Beechall's 59,053 acres support beef production, But the enterprise logic requires scale that no individual small landholder can replicate. This is why the price band is $106 Australian per acre, not $1,060 Australian per acre. The land is productive, it's just productive in a way that demands institutional scale. Quilpie Township itself is a study in frontier functionality. The main street has a pub, a general store, a fuel stop, and the Quilpie Shire Council offices. The Flying Doctor makes regular visits. The nearest major hospital is in Charleville, over 200 kilometres away. There is no mobile coverage for stretches of the drive from Brisbane that last hours. The Channel Country floods can cut road access for days or weeks. These are not hypothetical inconveniences, they are structural realities that depress land prices and have done so for over a century. What makes Beechill editorially specific is the transaction format. 59,053 acres in a single freehold parcel, offered at public auction, in a town whose total population could fit comfortably in a suburban apartment block. The Channel Country's braided creek systems, the Bellew, the Thargomindah Basin, the Cooper, run through or near properties of this scale. In a flood year, a cattle operation of this size can run thousands of head on short green pick that appears almost overnight after heavy upstream rain. That's the gamble embedded in the $106 Australian per acre price. You're buying access to one of the most variable and spectacular pastoral climates in Australia, at a price that reflects every year the rain doesn't come. Locals in the Channel Country, the handful of station families and service workers who make this region function, will tell you the same thing. The land is cheap because it's difficult, but difficult doesn't mean worthless. Quilpie's pastoral history stretches back to the 1870s, when squatters pushed into southwest Queensland following the cattle and sheep frontiers. The same land that sold for near nothing per acre then sells for near nothing per acre now, measured against the coastal markets. The system hasn't changed. The information just isn't reaching the people who might find it useful. Beechill is currently, as of the farm buy listing visible in 2025, a going concern. Mulga country, soft country, documented water infrastructure, freehold tenure. 6,275,000 Australia for 59,053 acres. $106 per acre. In Queensland. And if that number is sitting strangely in your mind right now, stay with it. Because the next region takes the per acre figure even further down. Most people who think about cheap land in Australia look north or west. Queensland, Western Australia, the Territory. They don't look at New South Wales. New South Wales is the state of Sydney prices, of Hunter Valley vineyards, of coastal land that moves at a premium. But Cobar Shire sits 687 kilometres by road from Sydney, roughly 8 hours, on the eastern edge of the true outback. And in 2025, 2 separate pastoral stations in this shire are actively listed at prices that fall well under $300 per acre. The first is Carew, located at 7024 Mullier Road, Cobar, New South Wales 2835. Area 14,504 hectares or 35,840 acres. Asking price $3,995,000 Australian dollars, approximately $112 per acre. Marketed by Lord with Delta Pollard and listed on commercialrealestate.com.au in 2025. The second is Cable Downs, also in Cobar, New South Wales 2835, covering 4,609 hectares, 11,612 acres, at an asking price of $990,000 Australian dollars. That's approximately $85 per acre. Also marketed via Lord and regional agents, also visible on commercialrealestate.com.au in 2025. 2 pastoral stations, 1 shire. Combined acreage of 47,452 acres. Asking prices at $85 and $112 per acre. These are not the same property. These are 2 separate enterprises, both trading in the same semi-arid New South Wales rangeland, both documented in the same calendar year. The pricing pattern is not a single data point. It's a price band confirmed by 2 independent listings in the same market at the same time. Cobar Shire covers approximately 45,000 square kilometres of semi-arid rangeland. The 2021 ABS census recorded approximately 4,098 residents, Population density around 0.09 persons per square kilometre. Cobar town itself has a hospital, a school, a couple of supermarkets, and a mining industry. Copper mining has operated in the area for well over a century. The Cobar copper mine is still active, but the pastoral land surrounding the town operates in a different economic layer entirely, one that reflects the climate realities of the Ynys Thaudiel's Western Division. That climate reality is this. Median annual rainfall at Cobar runs at approximately 390 millimetres, but with the kind of variability that makes the figure nearly meaningless in any individual year. The Western Division of New South Wales has experienced multi-year droughts that have wiped out entire pastoral enterprises. The Millennium Drought, roughly 2000 to 2009, hit Western New South Wales particularly hard, and the 2017-2019 drought was described by some station managers in the region as the worst in living memory. The land price reflects this. You are buying productive grazing country for sheep, cattle and goats. Karoo and Cable Downs both support multi-species grazing, but you are buying it at a price that already prices in the bad years. A note on the exclusion fencing context that makes these listings editorially specific. Both Karoo and Cable Downs are described as exclusion-fenced pastoral platforms. Exclusion fencing in Western New South Wales means precisely what it sounds like. Perimeter fencing designed to keep dingoes and feral animals out of the grazing area. The cost of installing and maintaining exclusion fencing on properties of this scale runs into millions of dollars. The fact that these properties carry that infrastructure is part of what places them in the $85 to $112 per acre band rather than lower. You're not buying bare dirt, you're buying a functional pastoral enterprise, fenced against predators, in a state most Australians assume has no land left at this price level. To put the New South Wales pricing in national context, broadacre cropping land closer to Sydney, in the central west around Orange or Dubbo, commonly trades at several $1,000s per hectare. New South Wales South Coast farmland can push well above $10,000 per hectare. Karoo and Cable Downs are sitting at $215 to $275 per hectare. Same state, different universe. The system that produces both price points is the same New South Wales land market. The information about which half of that market exists rarely makes it out of the rural commercial listings. Ask anyone who has worked in Western New South Wales pastoral for more than a decade, and they'll tell you the same thing. The land has always been cheap, because the inputs are high and the margins are thin. Distance from processing facilities, distance from feed supplements during drought, distance from veterinary services. Each kilometre of isolation adds cost that the per acre price implicitly acknowledges. Cable Downs at $85 per acre isn't cheap because the land is bad. It's cheap because everything around the land is hard. The 687-kilometre drive from Sydney to Cobar passes through Bathurst, Orange, Parkes and Peak Hill before the country opens out into the classic Western Division landscape of red-brown plains, scattered mulga and vast sky. By the time you reach Cobar, you're in a different country. The copper headframe on the edge of town is the first visible landmark from the highway, and somewhere out past the headframe, on 35,840 acres of exclusion-fenced New South Wales rangeland, Karoo is sitting with an $3,995,000 Australia price tag and no buyer yet in sight. 2 regions, 2 states, both under $115 per acre. But price is only half the story here. What you haven't heard yet is what 904,168 contiguous acres actually looks like on a map, and what happens to the per acre number when you push the scale past anything a single state can contain. The next region runs a figure that makes $106 Australia look expensive. We're talking about $8 per acre in 2024 to 2025. With an active listing and a named agent. Western Australia is a state that most Australians understand to be large, but the numbers don't land until you're in them. The Shire of Yalgoo covers approximately 33,200 square kilometres of the Midwest Murchison goldfields, positioned between the towns of Mullewa, Mount Magnet and Kew, north of the Wheat Belt and south of the Pilbara. The 2021 ABS census recorded 313 residents in the Yalgoo locality. The population density across the Shire is approximately 0.01 persons per square kilometre. This is country that operates on geological time, not human time. The property anchoring this region is Meeker Station, a pastoral lease sheep station in the Murchison area north of Yalgoo. It is currently listed by Morgan Sudlow and Associates on their rural for sale inventory at $7,500,000 Australian dollars plus carbon value. The listing was visible through 2024 and 2025. The area of the property, approximately 365,904 hectares, or 904,168 acres. Run the arithmetic. 7.5 million Australian dollars across 904,168 acres produces a per acre asking price of approximately $8 Australian, $8 per acre, for nearly 1 million acres of Australian land. I know what you're thinking. It sounds like a typo. It is not. The reason the per acre figure is $8 Australian dollars is structural, not incidental. Meeker Station sits in a hot desert climate. The mean annual rainfall at Yalgoo is approximately 260 millimetres, and many individual months record below 20 millimetres. Summer mean maximum temperatures regularly exceed 37 degrees Celsius. The country is classified as hot, arid rangeland, suitable for extensive pastoral sheep grazing in good years, with carrying capacities that require enormous acreage per animal. The tenure adds another layer. Meeker Station is a pastoral lease, not freehold. This is an important distinction. A pastoral lease in Western Australia is a Crown land tenure that grants the leaseholder the right to graze livestock on the land, but does not confer full freehold ownership. The Crown retains underlying title. Pastoral leases can be renewed, but they can also be resumed by the state for conservation or other purposes. This tenure structure, combined with the rainfall, the heat, and the distance, explains why 904,168 acres asks $8 per acre. No single factor produces that price. All of them together do. Yalgoo sits 478 kilometres by road from Perth, roughly a 6-hour drive on the Great Northern Highway through Murawa and Mullawa. There is a roadhouse, a small caravan park, a school of the air operation, and the Yalgoo goldfield history that dates back to the 1890s rush. The Murchison goldfields were among the most significant gold-producing regions in WA during the late 19th century. Yalgoo, Meekatharra, Kew, and Day Dawn all had active mines and townships at various points. The gold is largely depleted, or at least the accessible surface deposits are, but the pastoral history that overlapped with the gold rush has persisted in the form of sheep stations that have operated across these landscapes for over 100 years. The carbon dimension of the Meeker Station listing is worth pausing on because it represents something relatively new in Australian pastoral economics. The listing price of $7.5 million plus carbon value acknowledges that the property carries a carbon project, or the potential for one, in addition to its pastoral value. The native vegetation on large pastoral leases in arid WA can qualify for Australian carbon credit units under the savanna burning or avoided clearing methodologies. At scale, a 904,168 acres is extreme scale. The carbon credit potential can rival or exceed the traditional pastoral value. The listing price structure is telling you that explicitly. To contextualise the per acre figure against the rest of the WA land market, the WA South Coast and Southwest farming regions in 2020 recorded median land prices of $4,145 to $9,099 per hectare. That's $1,677 to $3,681 per acre. 50-hectare blocks near regional centres in those areas were recording $5,796 to $8,251 per hectare. Meeker Station's asking price of approximately $20 per hectare, $8 per acre, sits orders of magnitude below the state's agricultural benchmark. Same state, same land registration system, completely different market. The Murchison landscape is one of the more visually striking in outback Australia. Spinifex-covered red plains, granite outcrops, dry creek beds lined with river red gums, and a sky that at night 478 kilometres from the nearest serious light pollution, shows the full Milky Way core. The night sky alone justifies the description spectacular. It also has no mobile coverage for long stretches, summer heat that can incapacitate livestock and humans within hours, and the kind of isolation that means a medical emergency involves a Royal Flying Doctor Service call, not a 20-minute drive to an emergency department. The beauty and the hardship are not separable here. 904,168 acres. Australia's $7.5 million asking price. Australia $8 per acre. The listing is live. The agent is named. The tenure is documented. And if you need a benchmark for how absurd that figure is by global standards, Luxembourg, an entire European country, covers approximately 640,000 acres. Mecca Station is larger than Luxembourg, and it's asking less than $8 Australia per acre in 2025 through a named rural agent in Western Australia. The system that produced this price did not make a mistake. South Australia is the state that most people associate with the Barossa Valley, the Adelaide Hills, and McLaren Vale wine country. Peri-urban farmland that trades at prices that make the pastoral interior feel like a different planet. And in terms of land economics, it is. Flinders Ranges Council covers approximately 4,198 square kilometres of the northern Flinders Ranges, taking in the townships of Quorn and Hawker, and the vast pastoral country stretching northeast towards the South Australian outback. The 2021 ABS census recorded 1,646 residents across the LGA, population density around 0.39 persons per square kilometre. The property anchoring this region is Martins Well Station, located at 2101 Eridina Road, Martins Well, SA 5440, northeast of Hawker. The Collier's agribusiness listing on commercialrealestate.com.au, last updated 2nd May 2026, records the status as for sale at $6,750,000 Australian, plus plant and equipment. The property covers 105,000 hectares, approximately 259,000 acres. Per acre asking price, approximately $26 Australian. This is a 2026 listing. It is current market evidence, not historical reference. The property is currently de-stocked. That single operational detail matters enormously. A pastoral station that is de-stocked, meaning it carries no livestock at the time of listing, is signalling one of several things: an operational transition between ownership, a financial reset following drought-induced losses, or a deliberate decision to present the land without the complication of livestock valuations. In Martins Well's case, the listing was updated in May 2026 with de-stocked status, confirming that whoever is selling has cleared the animals and is presenting the land asset on its own terms. The rainfall data for Hawker is worth sitting with. The mean annual rainfall is approximately 303 millimetres, but the median annual rainfall, the figure that better reflects the typical year, is only 145 millimetres. That gap between mean and median is a statistical fingerprint of extreme variability. It tells you that a handful of exceptional rainfall years are pulling the average up, while the typical year is significantly drier. Pastoral operations in this climate must be designed around the bad years, not the good ones. The $26 per acre price reflects that design constraint. The northern Flinders Ranges are geologically ancient, among the oldest exposed rock sequences in the world. The Ediacaran fossil sites in the region record some of the earliest complex multicellular life on Earth, around 600 million years ago. The ACRE Flinders Ranges National Park, which borders pastoral country in the area, draws visitors for the Wilpena Pound Formation and the ochre-coloured ridgelines that glow at dawn and dusk. Martins Well Station sits in this landscape: ancient ridges, sparse bluebush and saltbush plains, creek lines marked by river redgums. Country that is visually striking and economically marginal at the same time. The drive from Adelaide to Hawker covers 370 to 399 kilometres, taking over 4 hours each way. Past Port Augusta, the highway narrows and the country opens out. By the time you're north of Quorn, the Flinders ridgelines are rising to the east, and the pastoral country is visible in all directions. Red soil, scattered scrub, occasional windmill marking a bore. The nearest major hospital to Martinswell Station is in Port Augusta. Depending on road conditions and the specific location on the 105,000-hectare property, that can mean a drive of 3 hours or more under normal circumstances. South Australia's higher rainfall farming belts, the Yorke Peninsula, the southeast, the Mount Lofty Ranges fringe, trade broadacre cropping land at several $1,000s per hectare. Peri-urban blocks near Adelaide can push significantly above that. Martinswell Station at $64 Australian per hectare, $26 per acre, reflects pastoral-only suitability and a remoteness that places it outside the price logic of SA's productive agricultural zones entirely. The Collier's agribusiness listing makes the suitability explicit. This is rangeland conservation and pastoral grazing country, historically used for sheep, cattle, and conservation purposes. What makes the 2026 listing particularly notable is its timing. The property has been offered as destocked with a Collier's mandate. Collier's agribusiness is one of Australia's major rural commercial agencies, not a local real estate office. The fact that a national agency is listing a 259,000-acre SA pastoral station at $26 Australian acre in 2026 tells you that the price band is not a function of obscure or poorly marketed inventory. It's a function of what the market will pay for this category of country, in this climate, at this distance from the capital. Locals in the Hawker and Corn area, the people who service these stations, run the fuel stops, staff the schools of the air operations, will tell you that the Northern Flinders has always operated on its own economic logic. Wool prices, beef prices, drought cycles, and the occasional tourist season shape the local economy in ways that have almost nothing to do with what's happening in Adelaide. $26 per acre for 259,000 acres of ancient rangeland, listed in 2026 through a named national agent. If that sounds like it should be more expensive, you've been spending too much time looking at the residential half of the Australian land market. Everything up to this point has involved parcels between 11,000 and 900,000 acres. The final entry doubles down on scale. 1,115,000 acres, confirmed in 2 separate transactions in the same 24-month window by 2 different institutional parties. One of them bought it for 40 million Australian dollars. The other is trying to sell it for 35 million Australian dollars. The per acre figure across both is under 36 Australian, and the buyer in 2023 was an international commodity trader operating at the scale of the country itself. Everything you've seen so far has one structural feature in common: large Australian pastoral stations trading at prices the residential market doesn't know exist. But none of what came before compares to what's documented in the Barkly region of the Northern Territory, not in acreage, not in transaction evidence, and not in what the ownership history tells you about who actually holds land at this scale in Australia. The Creswell locality covers approximately 28,238 square kilometres of the Barkly Tablelands in the Northern Territory, bordering Queensland to the east. The 2016-2021 population profile records 45 residents, 45 people across 28,238 square kilometres, a population density of approximately 0.002 persons per square kilometre. This is some of the emptiest inhabited land on the planet, in one of the most remote corners of a country that specialises in remote. The property is Benmara Station, located at Creswell NT 0852. The numbers here require a moment. Total area, 451,176 hectares, or approximately 1,115,000 acres. 1.1 million acres, in a single pastoral station. Carrying capacity, approximately 17,500 adult equivalents across open downs and forest country. This is not a farming property. This is a cattle enterprise operating at the scale of a small sovereign territory. Now here's where the documentation becomes exceptional. Benmara Station has 2 verifiable transaction data points within a 24-month window. First transaction, 11th May 2023, reported by Beef Central, the authoritative Australian rural press source for cattle industry transactions. Benmara Station sold bear for 40 million Australian dollars in an off-market deal. Bear means without livestock. Across 451,200 hectares, that 40 million Australian dollars works out to approximately $35 per acre or $88 per hectare. Second transaction, 2025, CBRE Agribusiness Marketing Benmara Station on behalf of new owner ACRE Partners at an asking price of $35 million, approximately $31 per acre or $78 per hectare. The CBRE listing on commercialrealestate.com.au was last updated 10th November 2025. Two transactions, two prices. $35/acre in 2023, $31/acre ask in 2025, both for the same 1,115,000 acre property. Both documented with named sources, Beef Central for the 2023 sale, CBRE Agribusiness via commercialrealestate.com.au for the 2025 listing. This is not one data point that might be explained away as an anomaly. This is a price band confirmed by institutional parties across 24 months of market evidence. The Barkly Tablelands trades at $31 to $35 Australios per acre. That is the structural price for this category of country. The owner attempting to sell in 2025 is ACRE Partners. ACRE Partners is not an Australian pastoral company. It is a global commodity trading firm, a company that operates in oil, natural gas, power, and agricultural commodities across multiple continents. The fact that ACRE Partners holds a 1,115,000 acre cattle station in the Northern Territory tells you something specific about who participates in the pastoral land market at this scale. This isn't a family station being passed between generations of territory cattlemen. This is an international, institutional asset, managed as a commodity position, being marketed through CBRE Agribusiness to the next institutional buyer. Creswell sits 768 kilometres by road from Darwin, the nearest major city and the only city in the territory with a functional international airport. The climate is semi-arid monsoonal, average annual rainfall of approximately 420 to 480 millimetres, concentrated almost entirely in a wet season that runs roughly November through March. The wet season brings flooding that can cut road access for weeks. The dry season brings dust, heat, and the slow drawdown of water in the bore infrastructure that keeps cattle alive. Managing 17,500 adult equivalents across 1,115,000 acres in this climate requires water infrastructure investment, mustering infrastructure, and logistical capability that rivals a small military operation. The Barkly Tableland itself is one of the most distinctive pastoral landscapes in Australia. Unlike the mulga and spinifex country further west, the Barkly opens out into vast Mitchell grass downs, flat, treeless in large stretches, with a black, cracking clay soil that holds water after rain and supports the Mitchell grass pasture that is among the most productive cattle fattening feed in the country. In a good wet season, Benmara's Mitchell grass downs can carry cattle numbers that approach the property's full 17,500 adult equivalent capacity. In a failed wet season, the same country can be eaten bare within weeks. The carrying capacity of 17,500 adult equivalents is a long-run average, not a guarantee. That uncertainty is embedded in the $35 Australian per acre price. The 2023 to 2025 price trajectory, $35 a train acre to $31 Australia a train acre, is itself editorially significant. In most Australian property markets, 2023 to 2025 saw prices move upward. In the Barkly pastoral market, Benmara went to market in 2025 at a price lower than its 2023 purchase price. The institutional owner bought bare for 40 million Australian dollars and is listing for 35 million Australian dollars, a capital loss of 5 million Australian dollars if the ask is met. That doesn't tell you the land is worthless. It tells you that the Northern Territory pastoral market operates on a different set of economic mechanics than the residential property markets most Australians follow. Institutional buyers accept capital losses on pastoral positions when the operational or strategic thesis doesn't perform. The land keeps going. The ownership changes. You may be sitting there wondering what it would even mean to operate 1,115,000 acres. The answer is a workforce of station hands, ringers and managers, a mustering operation using helicopters, motorbikes and horses simultaneously, bore maintenance schedules across dozens of bores, fencing programs measured in hundreds of kilometres, and a logistical chain connecting a property 768 kilometres from Darwin to a processing industry in Queensland or the Northern Territory's live export trade. Benmara is not a passive landholding. It is an operating business at industrial scale, priced at $31 to $35.35 acre, because the inputs required to run it at that scale are vast. The climate is unforgiving, and the nearest city is most of a day's drive across open rangeland. The WA cropping land medians in 2020 were sitting above 3,000 Australian per hectare. Northern WA farmland medians ran around $1,310 per hectare. Benmara, at 78 to 88 Australian per hectare, is 15 to 40 times lower than those benchmarks. Same country, same land registration system, different tier of the market. And the people who operate in that tier, CBRE Agribusiness, Hartree Partners, Beef Central's readership, are not confused about what they're looking at. They understand exactly why the price is what it is. The information just hasn't been flowing to anyone outside that ecosystem. Here's the thing that stays with you after you've run through all 5 of these regions. The price per acre figure you see on Benmara, $31 in 2025, is not the floor of the Australian land market as a curiosity or an accident. It is the price that a rational institutional market has placed on 1,115,000 acres of semi-arid monsoonal cattle country, 768 kilometres from the nearest city, after 2 independent parties negotiated 2 separate transactions in the same 24-month window. The system isn't broken, the system is working exactly as designed. The question is, who designed it, and who gets to know the price? One last number, 45. That's the recorded population of the Creswell locality, the human presence across 28,238 square kilometres of Barkly Tablelands. 45 people, and one of the largest pastoral stations in Australia, owned by an international commodity trader, asking 35 million Australian dollars for 1,115,000 acres. The ratio of acres to people here is not a figure most Australians have a mental category for. The land is there, the price is documented. The system that keeps that price invisible to the residential market is not accidental. $106 per acre for 59,053 freehold acres of Queensland Channel country, auctioned in December 2025, and $8 per acre for 904,168 acres of WA pastoral lease in hot desert climate, listed by a named agent in 2025. 5 regions, 5 states and territories, 1 price tier that operates entirely outside the market most Australians see. The question isn't whether these prices are real, they're documented. The question is how long a market this size stays invisible, and who benefits from it staying that way. Which of these 5 regions surprised you the most? Tell me below, and tell me why. And if you want to keep seeing the parts of the Australian land market that don't show up on domain or realestate.com.au, subscribe. There's more country out there that hasn't been mapped yet.